Hi, students. Today we're going to look at the leap and we're going to go through the literary terms that are associated with it. And then I'm also going to give you the directions for the Pearson activity that you are doing today. Now, these literary terms, you can find them on page 803 and 805. And just for your awareness, we will be having the quiz on these literary terms tomorrow. So, tomorrow you can expect to see questions on these terms on your assessment that you're going to take along with the Pearson assessment. So let's get right into it. Starting on page 803, we have these three literary terms we're going to talk about. The first one is suspense, is basically the overarching category on this page. This whole thing, this story, The Leap, has a lot of suspense in it. And suspense is really something author does to get the reader to be curious, have some tension or anxiety. Uh, if you have tension, anxiety, or are curious, you're likely to keep reading. So suspense is a really good tool that you can use when you're writing something. This is going to be important because you guys, your last big assignment of the year is going to be to write a story, and you're going to want to include potentially, this is one good element to include to make your story better, something that will add suspense. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can add suspense to stories, but we're going to specifically talk about two of them that are used in The Leap. One of those ways you can add suspense is by using foreshadowing. And this isn't a new term, this is one that you should be pretty familiar with. It's using clues to suggest an event that hasn't happened yet. Now, there's definitely a lot of clues like this in The Leap. If you just think about the very first scene where this daughter is with her old mother and her mother can barely see anymore, but she moves so well. It's like it's almost amazing that she never bumps into anything and she can move so nimbly. And that might be a foreshadowing that there's more to the mother than what you might expect. There's more foreshadowing also in the story, of course. There's a lot more foreshadowing. But the daughter even talks about how the mother had three times where she basically saved her daughter's life, three leaps. And she explains what they are, but then stops. And you're like, what? Like, tell me about him. And then she kind of goes into other topics. So that's also foreshadowing, telling you something that might be happening ahead of time. And then the last one is I think one of the most annoying when you're reading a book or watching a movie, but it's really, really effective to give suspense, and that is called pacing. And pacing is the speed or the rhythm of your writing. Now, that doesn't mean how fast you write. What that means is, let's say you're telling something that's really exciting, something where like we can hardly wait to see what's going to happen next. The one example from The Leap that I can think of, or there's more than one example, but one particular example is when she's talking about her mother, who was the acrobat, getting ready to do this fateful trapeze act where, tragedy is going to strike. And she starts telling the story, and then she stops and starts talking about the weather that day. I mean, she literally goes almost a whole paragraph talking about the weather. And you're just like, hold on, I want to know what happens with the mom and the trapeze. But that pacing, switching speeds, kind of like going away from the action and to something else for a minute, it really creates suspense and adds something to your story. That's called pacing. Let's go to our next three words. The first one's maybe the most unfamiliar, and that is a motif. This is how you say that word. And motif is an important, reoccurring, or repeating element in literature, mythology, or another type of artistic expression. Now, a motif is something that reoccurs throughout the course of the story. It's like the same idea happens over and over again, and it's supposed to give you some kind of a insight into the story, and it's usually something pretty important too. One example that I can think of that you're probably familiar with is like Romeo and Juliet. Now, Romeo and Juliet, this idea of a rose keeps popping up. I think a rose is mentioned in Romeo and Juliet like four or five different times, and that's partially what can make it a motif. First of all, every time the rose is talked about, something important is happening. And then secondly, it happens over and over again. That makes it a motif. Another example I can think of from movies is if you've ever watched any of the 007 James Bond movies, or maybe even if you're just familiar with them at all, a motif that happens over and over again in the James Bond movies is anytime something exciting is about to happen, anytime something important to the movie is about to happen, you hear something. Dun, 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 dun. You hear the James Bond theme song. And if you hear that James Bond theme song, you know something big time's about to happen. That's a motif, and it happens over and over again through the movie. Our next example of literary term is a symbol. And a symbol is a person, place, object, or idea that doesn't just represent itself, but something else too. So motifs and symbols are kind of related because a lot of times a symbol can be part of a motif, but in order to be a motif, it has to be repeated over and over again. A symbol can just be used one time and then it's done. So a symbol is something that it's one thing, but it also stands for something else. We've talked about symbols throughout the other stories we've done this year already. And then our last but not least, of course, is the theme. A theme provides a central insight or idea about human life or a behavior that the story presents. So, in other words, what's the big thing we're supposed to learn? It's almost a theme is almost like a moral of the story. What's something I can learn about human beings, human life? What's something I can learn about myself? Or what's something I can learn about how people act throughout this story? All of these literary terms, you want to make sure you definitely put them in your vocabulary notebooks or highlight them in your book because these, of course, will be used on your quizzes and later on your test. Second thing I got to show you is how to get into Pearson. Again, I'm using Tyler Danko. Let me go in and show you what you all need to do. You go into your Pearson just like this, and you can click on the middle circle here, classes. When you do that, you can go into your assignments here. Maybe I need to refresh this thing. Okay, I know what happened here. I didn't put the assignment in here yet. So you're going to see an assignment right here. I am sorry. You're going to see assignment right in here that's going to say the leap. Please click on that. I can get to it another way. You just click on it here. I'm going to get into it a different way just to make sure that I can still show you what you need to do. As soon as you click on that button that you're supposed to click on, you're going to see the leap appear. It's taking me just a second longer to get there. If you want to fast forward 30 seconds, go right ahead on your YouTube video here. But if I go into the leap, like I'm trying to get here, don't go into the leap this way. Otherwise, it won't be the assignment. Go into the leap through your assignments. But when you get into the leap, you're going to be in this story right here, and this is where I need you to be. The two things that you're going to do is, first of all, you're going to, I like to hide this. First of all, you're going to go into making meaning. When you go into making meaning, go down right here to analyze, craft, and structure. And under analyze, craft, and structure, you will be doing question 1, question 2, and question 4. You can completely skip this chart. I'm not making you do that. The next thing you're going to do is go under language development and click author's style. When you do that, you're going to be responsible for answering question 1 and question 2. Question 1 is a chart here that shows you some of the different motifs. The role of the drums in arms and limbs. These are two different motifs found in the leap, and you will be analyzing them. So that's the assignment that you need to do for Pearson. If you have any questions, as always, email me, and that's about it.